Rome, a blazing day around the year 855. The Pope rides in solemn procession from St. Peter's toward the Lateran, thousands of the faithful pressing at the horse's flanks. Then, in a narrow lane between the Colosseum and the Church of St. Clement, the Holy Father cries out, doubles over, and sinks into the dirt. A baby's wail rises over the crowd. Their Pope, it seemed, was a woman. For 400 years, the records say nothing. No pope, no priest, no chronicler breathes a word of a woman on St. Peter's throne. Then, in the middle of the 13th century, the story erupts across Europe, not as tavern gossip, but in the careful chronicles of Dominican friars, men trained by the church to weigh evidence. And they believed every word.
There was a certain pope, a woman, who disguised herself as a man. By her character and talents, she became a curial secretary, then a cardinal, and at last, pope. One day, while mounting a horse, she gave birth to a child.
Maeley was no fool. Beside the tale, he scrawled a single Latin word, require, meaning check this, verify this. Even the man recording it wasn't certain it was true. But the story had teeth. Once loose, it would not let go.
By the deceit of the devil, she was raised to the papacy, and though a woman, she presumed to preach and to teach.
The fullest, most influential version of all came from a chaplain who served inside the papal court itself.
This John was, it is asserted, a woman. As a girl, she was led to Athens dressed in men's clothing and grew so learned that none could match her. She taught in Rome and so was chosen for pope.
Martin's Chronicles survived in hundreds of manuscripts, and every scribe carried Joan along with it. Preachers named her from the pulpit. She appeared in the guidebooks pilgrims carried through Rome. Within a century, from England to Bohemia, and educated Christians simply knew, as plain fact, that a woman had once worn the tiara. They called her John the Englishman, born in the German city of Mainz to English parents. As a young woman, the story went, she fell in love with a wandering scholar. To follow him and her own hunger for learning, she did the one thing that could open the world to her. She became a man. Dressed as a monk, she left Mainz and crossed the length of Christendom. In Athens, she devoured philosophy and theology until no scholar could best her. Then, she turned south, toward the one city where such brilliance could carry a clever monk all the way to God's own throne, Rome. In Rome, she taught in the schools, and her fame spread through the Curia. She was made a cardinal, and when the reigning pope died, the cardinals turned to the most learned mind among them and elected, without the faintest suspicion, a woman as the Vicar of Christ. The tiara was placed on her head. Still, no one knew. She was, by every account, a superb pope, learned, eloquent, tireless. She said Mass, she consecrated bishops, she governed the church with a steady hand. That was the sharpest edge of the legend. Her sex changed nothing about how well she ruled. Only her body, in the end, gave her away.
But while pope, she became pregnant by her companion. Through ignorance of the exact time of the birth, she was delivered of a child while in procession from St. Peter's to the Lateran.
For 2 years, 7 months, and 4 days, the legend insists, she reigned unchallenged. She hid her swelling body beneath heavy vestments. But a secret keeps its own calendar, and hers was almost up. The great procession wound east from St. Peter's, across the Tiber, past the ruined Colosseum, toward the Lateran. And there, in a cramped lane between the arena and the little church of St. Clement, her body chose its moment. There was nowhere left to hide. The crowds had gathered to glimpse their Holy Father. Instead, they watched him buckle, collapse against the stones, and cry out. in the unmistakable voice of a woman in labor. In the filth of a Roman street, a pope gave birth to a child. What came next, the chronicles cannot agree on. In the gentlest tellings, mother and child simply die where they lie. In the cruelest, the horrified mob binds her feet to a horse and drags her through Rome until she is dead, then buries her at the spot. Either way, she is gone.
She was bound by the feet to a horse's tail and dragged and stoned by the people for half a league. And where she died, there she was buried.
The medieval world did not merely tell the story. It pointed to evidence. For centuries, they said every papal procession refused to enter that narrow lane, turning aside as if the ground itself were cursed. To the people of Rome, the detour was no mere habit. It was a confession in stone.
The Lord Pope always turns aside from that street, and it is believed by many that this is done in detestation of the event.
Then came the strangest relic of all. In the Lateran sat pierced marble chairs, the sedia stercoraria, and Rome whispered that each newly elected pope was made to sit upon one while a young deacon reached beneath to confirm he was, in fact, a man. Never again, the story went, would a woman slip through.
He has testicles, and they hang well, thanks be to God.
And in the Cathedral of Siena stood the boldest proof of all. High among the terracotta busts of every pope in history, one carried a startling label: Johannes VIII, a woman from England. For the better part of 2 centuries, pilgrims walked past the sculpted face of the female pope and did not blink. By the 15th century, the tale had reached the very heart of the Vatican. Bartolomeo Platina, the official librarian of the papacy, wrote Joan's life into his commissioned history of the popes. He hedged. But he did not leave her out.
These things I relate are popular reports drawn from uncertain and obscure authors. I set them down briefly, lest I seem stubbornly to omit what almost everyone affirms.
It was more than a book. At the Council of Constance, the reformer Jan Hus flung Pope Joan in the faces of his accusers as plain proof that the Church could err. Not one cardinal in the room stood up to deny that she had existed. But every last one of them was wrong. When scholars finally laid the story against the calendar of the 9th century, it came apart in their hands. There was never an empty throne for a woman to climb. Pope Leo IV died in July of 855. His successor, Benedict III, was consecrated that September. A gap of weeks, not the years the legend demanded. Coins survive from that exact season, stamped with Benedict's name beside the emperor's. Into that sealed and crowded window, no phantom reign of 2 years and 7 months could possibly fit. And before the 13th century, silence. 400 years of it. No letter, no rival, no scandalized enemy. The Byzantine court in Constantinople delighted in mocking Rome, yet never once mentioned a pregnant pope dying in the gutter. Such a catastrophe would have echoed across the world. The 9th century never heard the sound. The decisive blow fell from the most surprising hand of all. David Blondel was a French Protestant, a man with every motive to humiliate the papacy. Yet in 1647, he studied the sources honestly and pronounced the female pope a fable. For Blondel, the truth outranked the weapon it might have made. Catholic scholars piled on. Onofrio Panvinio and Cesare Baronio, the great historians of the Vatican, combed the archives and found no trace of her. By the 18th century, no serious historian, Catholic or Protestant, would defend Pope Joan any longer. Now the church that had once tolerated her set out to erase her. Around the year 1600, Pope Clement VIII ordered the Siena bust recarved. The woman's features were reshaped into a man's. The label changed to Pope Zachary. Quietly, John the Englishwoman disappeared from the cathedral. The pierced chairs were reclassified as old Roman bath furniture. The avoided lane was declared merely too narrow for horses. One by one, the proofs that had once seemed unshakable were explained away into nothing. And still she refused to die. If the story was pure invention, then the real mystery is not whether Joan lived, but why the medieval church itself embraced her for 300 years. Popes' own historians repeated it. Cathedrals displayed it. Why keep alive a legend so humiliating? Perhaps because it was useful. A sermon on the dangers of deceit. A sly joke at the expense of cardinals who could be fooled by a clever face. A dark warning that the church had grown so worldly a woman might rule it, and no one would notice. Then came the Reformation, and Joan was handed a second life. Protestant printers seized her, stamping out crude woodcuts of a pope in labor as the perfect emblem of Roman rot. The legend Catholics had told for centuries, Catholics now scrambled to bury, and the harder they pushed, the more famous she became. She slipped into the tarot deck as La Papessa, the Papess, a crowned woman seated in the chair of the church, later softened into the high priestess. Even the painted cards remembered a woman the historians had worked so hard to kill. To later generations, she became something new, a symbol of every woman shut out of power by the mere accident of her sex. Feminists reclaimed her, artists celebrated her. The cautionary tale of the medieval friars had turned, over the centuries, into something almost like a hero's legend. She became a novel, an opera, a film, a symbol. Every century remade her to fit its own needs. Victim, heroine, trickster, martyr. The woman who almost certainly never existed became one of the most unkillable figures the church never had. So there was no Pope Joan, no secret pregnancy beneath the vestments, no childbirth in the lane, no body dragged through Rome. And yet, for 800 years, in solemn chronicles and carved cathedral stone, and the writings of the Pope's own scholars, she was as real as any saint on the calendar. A legend, it turns out, does not have to be true to shape the world. The story of Pope Joan has outlived its own disproof because it asks a question the powerful have never welcomed. How well do we truly know the people who rule over us? If this story held you, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who loves a good mystery, and subscribe so you can walk with us into more of history's unfinished stories.